This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Public speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The chair will call upon public speakers at the appropriate time. Each public speaker is requested to state their name and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Public speakers who wish to speak in person should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Public speakers participating by Zoom who are wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of any written correspondence would like to speak during the meeting, they should raise their hand or submit a public speaker card. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Armstrong,
Here.
Commissioner Meadows,
Here.
Commissioner Xavier,
Here.
Vice Chair Obringer, Chair Carlson.
Here.
We have all members present except for Vice Chair Obringer absent.
Thank you. Next, this is the opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone wishing to speak during public comment, this is on an item that is not specifically identified on our agenda. Do we have any public comment? Any written public comment?
No public comment received.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on. I'm going to move item number 3 to the end, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is our consent calendar. Do we have any discussion about the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
No public comment received.
Thank you. With that, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second it. So motion by Meadows, second by Armstrong. Do you want to take a roll call vote, or is acclamation okay? All right, let's go ahead with the roll call vote.
Commissioner Armstrong,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier.
It's okay to vote yes, right?
Thank you. Commissioner Meadows,
Yes.
Vice Chair Obringer, and Chair Carlson.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes unanimously with Vice Chair Obringer absent.
All right, we move on to our regular agenda items. The first regular agenda item is item 5A, which is a Planning Department work plan for the fiscal year 25-26, and a status update presented by Matt Kelly. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Carlson. Good to be here. Matt Kelly, Director of Planning at CCTA. So as the slide states, I am here to talk about my department, which consists of myself and Colin today, the status of our fiscal year 25-26 work plan. So basically what we're here to talk about is the work plan that was adopted last June, and what the status of that is today. Let's see if I can get this to advance. Here we go. So a little about the role of the planning department at CCTA and what we do in the county. We are the designated transportation planning agency for the county. Because of that, we prepare a countywide transportation plan. As you know, we're in the middle of that, getting towards the end. That is our kind of visionary document looking out to year 2050. We manage or coordinate multi-jurisdictional planning efforts. A lot of that is done through the RTPCs. We also do all the active transportation planning, or at least the countywide portion of that. Our Vision Zero program, our micromobility program, That's a large portion of what Colin does. We also implement the Measure J GMP. Part of the sales tax measure was the growth management program. It was very popular because it sought to address the impacts of land use decisions on the transportation system. It requires our multiple jurisdictions to be collaborative, cooperative in their planning efforts at the sub-regional level. And also, it's the mechanism for getting the 18% return to source funds from Measure J back to the cities, somewhere around $24 million each year that goes back to the local jurisdictions. So you can fill potholes, fund staff time to participate in RTPC or other transportation planning activities, build bike trails, sidewalks, pretty much anything related to transportation. And also to and very importantly, to fulfill the authority's role as the state-designated congestion management agency for the county. And I discussed a lot of this in December when we adopted our 2025 CMP, but really that is all about monitoring and managing congestion in the county, developing and supporting alternatives to the single occupant vehicle use, and supporting our cities in their goals there, and then regional coordination, working with MTC and ABAG on the RTP updates, the Air District, and others on behalf of our local jurisdictions. As I mentioned, this work plan that I'm talking about today, fiscal year 25-26, was adopted as part of the CMA budget back in June 2025. Since July of 2025, you may have noticed that planning has only been operating with 2 full-time equivalents. As I mentioned, that's myself and Colin in the Director and Senior Transportation Planning slot positions. And then we have a vacant planner position open that we're hoping to fill in the next couple of months. So we have 21 major tasks identified in the work plan, and that has evolved since we identified those 21 initial tasks almost a year ago, because we're constantly evolving and taking on new initiatives. We are managing over 30 different consultant agreements, including our bench. We are administering over 40 TLC and PBTF grants, as well as Safe Routes to Schools and OBAG 3 projects. So that's a lot of work managing the allocations on those, as well as amendments, modifications of resolutions. It takes a lot of babysitting to manage all those projects on behalf of the local jurisdictions. And then we also manage and facilitate 2 of our advisory committees, the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Countywide Bicycle and Ped Advisory Committee, as well as a number of working groups and task forces like the Vision Zero Working Group, the Growth Management Program Task Force, and the CTP Task Force, among others. So here is the work plan, and I've kind of indicated the status of each task by a colored dot. As you can tell with the 21 tasks, the majority of them are ongoing. That's pretty much always the case for us. We have things that are cyclical on an annual basis that are kind of always ongoing, and then we have a lot of efforts that are kind of multi-year projects that will stay on the work plan until they're completed. But just wanted to highlight some of the completed efforts. The State Route 4 Vision Study, which was recently accepted by Caltrans as a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, thus allowing us to go out for SB1 Solutions for Congested Corridors funding for some of our State Route 4 projects and the Route 4 680 interchange project. We've also adopted our 2025 congestion management program back in December. And then we did our CMP monitoring last year, and we adopted our countywide travel demand model last year as well. But other than that, everything is still ongoing. I'm not going to go through all of this, but you know about the CTP. You have heard about our evacuation study, the San Pablo Avenue project, the Vision Zero planning, a lot going on. Yeah, and so you'll probably see a lot of this on our next year's work plan as well. So what's next? Continue implementation of the 21 tasks I just showed you. And right now we are developing the fiscal year 26-27 CMA budget and work plan. We will bring that to you in April as a draft. We then take that draft, well, the CMA budget particularly, to the Public Managers Association. So that's all the city managers and the county administrator. We take that to them starting in April. We may go back in May if we need to, because we need them to approve the CMA budget, because that determines how much each jurisdiction pays in CMA dues. So we want to make sure we have plenty of opportunity to get to them, get their buy-in and approval and acceptance of the work we do for them and the amount they're going to be paying. They don't end up paying the amount that they approve in April for a couple more years, but we've starting last year, we put a cap on the amount that we actually charge them to make their annual dues more consistent and reliable. And we'll get to this next month, but we hope dues and the CMA budget will be significantly less than last year. So dues should go down, but we'll get to that next month. And then in June, the authority adopts the fiscal year 26-27 budget. So, and then we come back at this time next year to tell you how we've been doing with that work plan. So that's all I have today. I'd be willing to take any questions. This item is for information only.
Any questions for Matt? Real quick, when you talk about what we're working on, and you're all working on, the two of you are working on, you mentioned administrating 40 plus. Does that include the OBEG 3 project? I'm just curious really how many OBEG 3 projects we still have ongoing.
I would say the majority of those are OBEG 3
All of them?
projects.
Okay, good. Any other questions? All right, any public comment? All right, Matt, thank you very much. Yes.
I just want to make a comment before we move on. Well, first of all, I appreciate your effort, Matt. The two of you doing all that, that's a lot of work. So great job with all that you got going on. If you're going to show this presentation in the future, and it's a good presentation, I might suggest, just for ease of reading, and I'm not colorblind, but when you talk about the completed work and the ongoing work, it was a little hard to see the green and versus the blue in there. Maybe make it pop a little bit more. Not criticizing, it was good information, but a little bit difficult to see from this distance.
I might have run into that same issue myself in going through it today, yeah.
Okay, all right, but
Duly noted.
thanks for the update.
Also wanted to give Danielle a little bit of credit. She has been helping out the planning department over the last year.
Did we have any public comment?
No public comment, thank you.
All right, well, we'll move on to item 5B, which is the model agreement and ordinance for the countywide micro-mobility operations program study, and approval to release the request for proposals for the professional services for development of the study, and we are joined by Colin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Carlson and committee members. Colin Clark, Senior Planner. So before you today, you have an action item for releasing an RFP, request for proposals, for a model agreement and ordinance for a countywide micromobility operations program. Next slide. So in the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan that was adopted in July of 2018, one of the top three implementation priorities from that plan was to advance micromobility. And in 2019, there was a forum and 2 policy papers that were put together with consultant support and coordination and participation from multiple jurisdictions countywide. And in terms of this draft scope in front of you today for the RFP, the CBPAC, the Countywide Bike and Ped Advisory Committee, has had an opportunity to provide input that results in what you see today in the packet. The scope would include assessment of existing and previous micromobility program operations, lessons learned, that kind of thing, and literature review would look at the best practices in terms of regulatory and operational practices, and then support the CTP in its ongoing update in terms of policy consistency. There will be interviews of stakeholders as part of this, and coordination with potential vendors is a possibility, and making sure that there's some fleet diversity and looking at the breakdown of acoustic bicycles versus electric bicycles versus e-scooters versus seated scooters versus adaptive devices of different types. And different topics that will be explored do include safety, education, accessibility, docked versus a dockless system, or maybe a hybrid one, and data sharing, parking, storage, electric charging is anticipated to be a part of this. And in terms of the engagement piece, it is meant to be all-inclusive of jurisdictions throughout Contra Costa, including cities, towns, unincorporated county, the transit operators, the park district with its trail system, for example, and different departments. And BART would be inclusive inside those, category of the transit operators. And of course, the general public and the CBPAC would help steer the effort moving forward, which would result in a model agreement, meaning a model contract that could allow for operations to occur across jurisdictional boundaries across 20-something different jurisdictions. The idea is to avoid a patchwork of piecemeal ordinances at the local level that have, different rules and that kind of thing, so that the user and the customer experience is prioritized. There is a separate finance grant that is meant to work the economic side of things or the finance side of things. So it'll be coordinated with this effort. And there's a number of different efforts ongoing with Mobility Hub, advancement. And of course, this will be coordinated with that as well. And then in terms of schedule and budget, this is the draft proposal with the budget not to exceed $150,000. This could be, once it gets kicked off, approximately a year and a half planning process. And again, the item before you today is an action item, so requesting that the committee recommend board approval for the RFP to be released, and open to comments and questions. Thanks.
Any questions? Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Appreciate the presentation. when I see ordinance up there, I think, okay, some level jurisdiction is going to issue an ordinance. Who is going to have the ordinance in this case?
Tim, do you want to touch that? I mean, that can be kind of part of the democratic
So,
process.
The important part is that if you're operating a micromobility system, every single city that is operating within their right-of-way would need to have an ordinance on the books. So the
So-
idea is every single city
Got it.
would then, or district, so like the Park District could potentially, anyone who owns right-of-way would need to have an ordinance to govern how that can operate in their right-of-way.
Okay, so it's not a county ordinance thing we're talking about, this is every jurisdiction. Got it, thank you.
And the question for me would be, is we're going to model that ordinance so there's somehow consistency across jurisdictions, and that way we don't have conflicts. But are we going to, I think of the experience we had in Pleasant Hill when we brought it in. But I also, and again, I'm full support. I'm just trying to figure out, are we going to try and look forward as well in how it fits within the planning that we're doing in mobility hubs, all those things. I just want to make sure it's really comprehensive. We learned lessons, but there's some things we haven't yet experienced because of the planning and work we're doing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that would be developing around this ordinance would inform the work with mobility hubs, and we'll probably answer some right-of-way questions and how we're going to handle the operational aspects of mobility hubs and who owns what jurisdiction and how we come up with these. That's why the agreements piece is really important we're going to need kind of an MOU with all of the cities to establish who is going to be doing what elements of mobility hubs. So hopefully you create kind of the entire governance structure for how you would be able to operate these, and also have oversight over whoever the ultimate provider is.
Right.
So we can share data and coordinate better and all of that.
Maybe just to add to that a little bit, I think the goal here is to make sure to your point, Commissioner Carlson, is that you have consistency, right? I mean, we have 19 jurisdictions in the county, like, our plan is to facilitate countywide travel. Like, I ride my bike to work and I go through 3 jurisdictions when I get here, when I ride my bike to work, right? And so I think it's really about having consistency. And then I think the other thing that's really important about this is providing some level of guidance and some sort of governance structure around micromobility. I think what we have seen in the past is, Pleasant Hill was a really good example, actually. Like, Pleasant Hill said, okay, Bird, we want you to come do micromobility. We had bike share. It lasted there, 30 days?
Yeah.
About 30 days, 45 days? Same with you guys, right? So, I think what we have to think about is thinking about the future, what is that governance? What is that business model? And start thinking about micromobility as being part of the public transportation system. Like, it's not just this private thing that we're just gonna allow happening out there, do whatever they want. It's like, let's come up with a governance structure, like there are other cities in the country that do more kind of management of these bike share programs, they geofence, they're managing it digitally, and so they're doing curbside management, so this goes back to what Danielle's talking about in terms of data, and so it's like, so what we're doing is it's a more of a public-private partnership with these micromobility companies where they're successful, we're achieving the goals, of the public. And I think the key here is we want micromobility and to be successful. We want people to ride more bikes. We want people to go purchase more e-bikes. We want to offer bike share programs. And I think what we want to be able to provide some guidance and governance around all of that, how that's going to work. So again, it can complement and be connected into the public transportation system, kind of thinking more forward. So when you see this countywide traffic management center that we're going to build with the Smart Signal program, that traffic management center will have the ability to be able to provide tools to the cities to draw geofences, right? In the future of this is where we want bike share to be. This is where we want, and also do potentially in the future curbside management and parking management and all these things that all these cities are doing. We were trying to provide more technical assistance and toolkits to be able to manage all these different elements of the transportation system.
Yeah, just anecdotally, and I just think about yesterday being at the Salesforce, transportation hub, trying to get in to where I needed to be. 2 scooters were blocking public access. So as much as we want to drive people to using these as tools for transportation, we also want to hold people accountable for, some people see that and go, I'm not getting on them because they just dump them everywhere. I'm tired of, the scattered arrangement of where they land. Well, how do you hold the rider accountable? How do you hold the service provider accountable? And again, I think there's still some interesting things to look at as we do that, because the idea being drive people to use these as tools, especially if we're closing that first and last mile, right? So, great.
Maybe to add a little anecdote, having negotiated this for another region and went through that exact issue and fight, the really cool part about being connected to the planning organization is that the biggest issue we found with parking of micromobility is that if there isn't enough for the vehicles to be parked to properly out of the way of pedestrians, that's where you get the bad behavior. But if we combine that data on ridership with where can we put in more bike parking and bike facilities to encourage good behavior, then you start to see a decrease in the number of complaints. But you can also, when you come up with that model agreement across all the jurisdictions, have teeth in there to be able to hold the operators of these systems accountable as well, to say, we need you to have a system where I can report violations of people parking in the right-of-way and blocking paths and passing on fines so that it's incentivizing behavior change from the individual user, and also incentivizing the operator to be clearing up areas and paying attention to the complaints that are coming in from the individual jurisdictions. So, we'll think of all of those things.
Yeah, and technology is so amazing when we talk about geofencing, or, you dump a scooter where a scooter doesn't belong and you walk away. If you haven't corrected that within 3 minutes, guess what? You're charged an extra $5 or whatever it might be. Or, there are those times where, I don't know how to put it politely, but others essentially vandalize. They just go knock the road down and they're a cluttered mess. Well, the riders aren't responsible, but the provider is responsible to go kind of clean up the mess. So I look forward to where we're moving into the future and how this is one more step to getting us where we need to be. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Do you anticipate with any of the draft ordinances that consistent across all the different jurisdictions, but to take into consideration kind of the evolving state requirements? There's a lot of legislation being pending right now with respect to licensing or typing with different types of vehicles, marking different types of vehicles and things like that. Or is that going to be on the burden of the individual cities to make sure it's consistent with that? Will the countywide model take into consideration all the state requirements?
Yeah, it's pretty traditional that you would reference the state statutes that are particularly around the operation of the vehicle. The state will always take the lead on that, and you would reference that. Where the city ordinance is more prominent is about the relationship to the right-of-way, the use of the right-of-way, and who has control over the right-of-way.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Jackie, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve the release of RFP 2601 for professional services for development of the study presented by Colin today.
I'll move release of RFP 26-01.
I second.
So a motion by Armstrong, second by Xavier. Can we have the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Obringer? Chair Carlson?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Vice Chair Obringer absent.
All right, moving on to our next regular agenda item 4C, an update on the MTC OBEG 4 and related policies and funding programs. And Matt is back at the table.
I'm back. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Carlson. Matt Kelly, Director of Planning at CCTA. All right, I'm all up on the screen here. Is camera on? It's up. Okay. Go. All right, so an update on OBAG 4, One Bay Area Grants, fourth cycle, and related policies and funding programs. So there's a lot going on at MTC related to OBAG. If you haven't talked to Commissioner Nowak lately, she will, I'm sure, give you an earful on what's been going on at MTC. I'm going to try and give you a summary of what's been going on over the last 6 months or so, in terms of wrapping up OBAG, and really it's a lot about the related policies, but also talking about funding sources other than OBAG. So we'll get into that. So first we'll talk about OBAG. This is the fourth cycle, came out of Plan Bay Area. The purpose of OBAG is to collaboratively between MTC and the counties to implement Plan Bay Area priorities for transportation, housing, and the environment. The goal is to invest these dollars, these local and regional dollars, to improve connectivity, equity, and sustainability, to incorporate the transit-oriented communities and transit priority policies. I'll get into those in a minute. There's $41 million set aside off the top of OBAG 4 for CTA-based planning. That's how we plan. We get money off the top, and our amount is $4.9 million. That's to last for the entire cycle until the next RTP. And MTC gets their own $40 million for base planning for the regional program. And then there's also a $5 million set aside off the top for the North Bay counties. And the reason for that is they don't have very many, what MTC calls growth geographies, or the TOCs and PDAs, priority development areas, transit-oriented communities. Because they don't have as many of those up in the North Bay, they get a little infusion of funding, so they aren't, so they're getting something, as opposed to all the money going into the center of the Bay. The MTC requires that each county do a call for projects for our local project sponsors, and project submittals are due to MTC at the end of October this year. So that really, gives us 6 months, but really it doesn't give us that long. We probably have about 3 or 4 months to get everything done, including development of the actual program for Contra Costa County, the call for projects. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So I'm going to talk a little about the transit-oriented communities. This was the most controversial, I'd say, of the components of OBAG 4, and it probably would have been, we probably would have been sitting here a few months ago had it not been for some of the issues in the TOC policy that took MTC. Their board workshop in November was spent next door trying to sort through this policy, as well as the last couple months worth of their meetings. So I'll try and, like I said, summarize what's happened. So these right here are revisions, just kind of general revisions to the TOC, and it's their incentive program framework. So where they're awarding funds to kind of higher performing locations. So in order to be a part of the TOC, you have to demonstrate that you meet the components of the policy. So part of what the controversy was determining how the scoring should be done for all the TOC locations. So what came out of the February MTC meeting was they agreed to decrease points for minimum and maximum office intensity, due to current market conditions. Basically, commercial isn't penciling out like it used to, and so they didn't want to, they didn't want to penalize folks for that. Also decreasing points for vehicle parking maximums, also due to market challenges. So same rationale there. Increased points for shared and unbundled parking policies, so really encouraging jurisdictions to spend some time thinking about their parking policies and potentially bundling their parking programs. And then, just allowing a wider variety of funding sources to fulfill the housing policies. So just so you know, TOC involves kind of 4 major policy areas, or what they're calling standards. One relates to density, one relates to housing, production, preservation, anti-displacement policies, parking, and station access. So that's really what folks are getting scored on. So now these are revisions to the TOC incentive program that actually affect OBAG funding, because they affect the OBAG criteria in scoring projects. Well, one is the deadline was moved back to July 1, 2027 for jurisdictions to submit their information to, for consistency with the TOC policy. Because of that, there was a lot of push for the commission to accept work that was in progress. So if a city was in the process of updating its housing policies or updating its parking policies, they would receive credit for that. Because the deadline was moved back 18 months, MTC says we're not going to offer any partial credit. You're either, by that date, you're either done or you're not. And you'll get whatever points for whatever's done at the time. For those counties that are part of SB 79, that is not Contra Costa. It is Alameda, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. We're just this far from being part of SB 79. Any jurisdiction that is in a SB 79 county, their TOCs basically receive full credit for the maximum allowable densities because it's assumed that they have that under SB 79. The housing protection policies, this was very controversial. Most of the comments received at the commission were from landlords, commercial developers, residential developers, and it was mostly, it was about the housing protection policies and the 2-option policy. There was an option that jurisdictions could adopt. So there's a list of several different policies they can adopt. So they have a menu of policies. It's whether they adopt their own policies at the jurisdiction level or are adopting kind of county-wide policies. And so the 2 options were you could have one county policy and one local policy, or you could get have 2 county policies and no local policies. There was a lot of debate back and forth. The commission ended up going with one of each. So you still have to have a local policy. You cannot fully rely on county policies. A higher threshold for the incentive program. So 85 points is what you need to meet in order to be part of that incentive program. And between about 10 and 15 cities qualify. Actually, we do have several in the county that did qualify. It is Antioch, Concord, El Cerrito, Hercules, Lafayette, Orinda, Pittsburgh, Richmond, Walnut Creek, and unincorporated county. So they will have the opportunity to apply for the performance-based formula at the bottom, where it's the city's population and number of TOCs. So basically, out of those jurisdictions I mentioned, the smaller ones can apply for $1 to $2 million each, and the larger for Antioch, Concord, Richmond, and the county can apply for $2 to $4 million each. Okay, so that's OBAG, TOC. There's a lot more I can say about those, but I'm gonna move on to Measure J programs. So Measure J programs 12 and 13, that's Transportation for Livable Communities and the pedestrian bicycle trail facilities. Those are part of Measure J. We've given out funding for 2 cycles of those. We now have accumulated enough funds to be able to do a 3rd cycle, so we're very excited about that. We had to put the 3rd cycle off for a while, but now it's back, and we're going to align it with the OBAG process because, you know, we're required to do a call for projects. We figured we'd include as much in the call for projects as possible, you know, reduce the burden on the project sponsors so they aren't having to apply for multiple programs. So a little bit about Program 12, 5% of Measure J goes to Transportation for Livable Communities, or CCTLC, as it's affectionately known. These are funds to be used on projects that encourage the use of alternatives to the single occupant vehicle. And, you know, the way I like to describe it is it's a way to get, you know, locations like, you know, these priority development areas and now TOCs across the street like Contra Costa Center, funding the kind of infrastructure and design that makes them a livable community. So building the bike and ped facilities to access these types of locations, traffic calming so it's safe around these areas, access improvements for the people as well as the transit vehicles, and then a note that allocations for TLC are subject to compliance with the growth management program. So if you're not in compliance with the growth management program, you can't apply for TLC program, but no one's out of compliance, so that's not a problem. I will just point out that East County does not have access to TLC funds. That was a decision made a long time ago, back in 2004, during Measure J development, and basically they decided to send their funds to Highway 4 and EBART and kind of give up their TLC funds. But they do have access to the PBTF Program 13 funds, so that's 1.5% of Measure J, and those are to be used for construction of pedestrian and bicycle facilities around the county, including and especially our regional trails. So Cycle 2, which is almost 10 years ago, as I mentioned it, we had to delay Cycle 3. That allocated over $35 million to local projects around the county through a competitive call for projects. So most of those projects are, you know, under design or in construction or whatever the funds were applied for back then. Some are completed today, but most are in some stage of design or construction. And we've assumed there's going to be about $40 million available for this Cycle 3. So some good opportunities to fund some good local projects. So those are the two, you know, elephants in the room, the two big funding programs, but there's other stuff going on around the state and the region that we are aware of, and we want to incorporate, if we can, into this process. So the through CCTA ones are ones we hope we can incorporate into this process. So kind of another carve out from, not a carve out from OBAG, but a part of OBAG is the CARE program. It's actually funded by REAP funds. The CARE program is designed to fund projects identified through the community-based transportation plan development, and community-based transportation plans are plans prepared for and focused on equity priority communities. So looking at transportation challenges and gaps in infrastructure and services in those equity priority communities. And so we've identified those in the CBTPs. CARE is a way we can actually fund the projects, a dedicated funding source. We try and fund them with a variety of sources, but CARE is something that, you know, is specifically for them. So there's 3.1 million available for Contra Costa projects, and there's a couple different categories, but they're basically designed to advance the projects to implementation. And it was funded under OBAG 4, and the schedule is concurrent with OBAG 4, but it's not part of that, the county allocation. It is separate from the big OBAG 4 allocation to Contra Costa. So we have to keep it separate in that different projects will be applying for it, but it'll still be part of the same larger call for projects. We also have been notified by the Air District that there are TFCA funds for additional bikeway funding. We believe there will be about $3.5 million available for bicycle infrastructure, and submittals for those are due in October as well. So we're kind of trying to brainstorm ideas for that, but we intend to include that as part of this call. And then at the same time, there are others that are holding calls for projects, and namely the ATP program, Active Transportation Program, both the state program and the regional program through MTC are going on starting later this month. Their call for projects is open and submittals are due in June. So I list those not because they're part of our call, but they're considerations, especially for project sponsors. They should, you know, be strategic in their applications. So, you know, making sure they are applying for the right funding sources, and in some cases, you know, applying for both, you know, PBTF and, you know, the regional active transportation program on a project may make sense, but we want people to be aware of everything that's going on so they can be strategic. So the proposed schedule for the whole process, OBAG, TLC, PPTF, and the others, is, well, it goes through the end of October. That's our drop dead deadline. But we're going to start this month by meeting with MTC to confirm our OBAG 4 call for projects process, or our proposed process. I'm not getting into what we've proposed so far because they haven't accepted it yet. Today it's really just an information item to kind of daylight everything that's going on. We're going to get into the specifics of what the call will actually look like, what the criteria would look like. We're going to do that through the TCC, so I've got that next on the calendar for April and May to work through our technical coordinating committee to develop that call for projects and all the guidelines, scoring criteria, evaluation committees, all that kind of stuff. Generally, this is all done through the TCC, and then the CBPAC helps out on the scoring generally for PBTF, and in the past, the RTPCs have helped out on scoring for the local projects. but we'll be revisiting all that and coming up with a set of guidelines for this process, and we'll bring that to the board probably in May or June, probably June. And June is the targeted release for the call for projects. That gives us a very short summer to wrap things up. As I mentioned to staff this morning, you should probably consider scheduling a August TCC meeting. We don't normally hold TCC in August, but when it's OBAG time, we usually have to. So I'm having to tell staff to check their vacation schedules for that. But really, it's all about getting everything ready for the board to adopt in October so that we can get it to MTC for their October 30th deadline. And I have an "and" there after MTC. I'm not sure what that is referring to. Nominations are due to MTC in October. So that is my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I think I had a little PTSD from ABAG, MTC joint committee meetings on some of these items.
Wasn't my intention.
I survived them. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. I should know the answer to this, but I don't, and I might have missed it in your presentation, but you listed a bunch of cities when we were talking about transit-oriented communities. It's not everybody in the county. How are transit-oriented communities defined? And if you're not a transit-oriented community, are you still some way eligible for OBAG for funding?
Great question. I should have gone into the background of TOC. So TOC jurisdictions are jurisdictions that have a transit stop or station that meets MTC's definition for a major transit stop. So it's all the BART stations, our ferry station stops, terminals, and really that's it. So our major rail stations and ferry stops. It could eventually, if there's ever bus rapid transit on, say, San Pablo Avenue, those stations would then become part of TOC and would then force us to be an SB 79 county, because any county with more than 15 stops becomes a SB 79 county. So that is the reason, your jurisdiction is not on that list, because there is not a station there that qualifies.
So the station must be within the jurisdiction, not some proximity to one of these stations. I mean, we're less than 5 miles from a station, but I guess we're not a transit-oriented community because it's not in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's very focused around the station site and who's doing the planning there, or who's responsible for that location.
Okay.
And then your second question.
Right.
So yes, under OBAG, OBAG is open to TOC and non-TOC jurisdictions. There is a requirement that 80% of OBAG funds go to the growth geographies, so the TOCs or PDAs, priority development areas. You do have some of those, but that's actually for us to keep track of whether our funding is going to the right percentage of those locations. And in OBAG 3, the requirement was 70 at that time, so it was a lower requirement, but we were still, I believe, over 80 last time. So we don't think that'll be a problem. But yeah, so yes is the answer. However, we last time, our approach with OBAG was to use as much as we could for some of our regional programs, like the Smart Signals program and Safe Routes to Schools, things like that. So we may consider that again in, focusing the OBAG funds on more regional countywide projects and using the TLC PBTF to fund the local projects, but that's up for debate at this time and up to MTC's concurrence on our proposal.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
Just, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But one clarifying thing is for OBAG 4, it's really important. There's a regional portion and there's a county portion. And the TOC component of OBAG 4 only applies to the regional TOC incentive program, which is, I think it's like 40 million, I think off the top of my head, but like,
Yeah.
so what happens with OBAG is, just give you some maybe helpful framework here, is OBAG is all of the state transportation, like STPG funds, so it's basically all of the formula federal funds, so we're talking about STP, so, Surface Transportation Program, Congestion Management Air Quality Funds, CMAQ funds, those are two federal fund source. And this is all of the Surface Transportation Block Grant funding, which is all the formula funds. And so, so all those formula funds go to MTC. That's like the first step. So then OBAG, we do this call every 4 years because we reauthorize the highway bill every 4 years. And so the existing highway bill expires in September of this year. And so OBAG 4 is kind of in anticipation of the reauthorization of the next highway bill. So you have all the STPG funds that we're anticipating to come from the next reauthorization bill. So then the way it gets distributed typically is that 50% of those funds go to the region, 50% of those go to the counties. And so that 41 million that Matt was mentioning, that is the county share target by a formula in which MT uses for around population and RENA. So that's how that 41 million gets kind of made up, right? And so that's our county target share. So the TOC component of OBAG 4, the way it's been developed, there's a TOC policy that MTC approved, but it only applies to the regional pot, not to the county share. So it's not going to impact like our CCTA call for projects because it's not within that county share. Did I get that right, Matt?
Yeah, it's an additional pot of incentive funding on top of all the other, yep, yeah.
So that's a point of clarification that I just want to make sure, like the TOC only applies to this regional pot. And the regional pot will probably end up being some sort of like competitive grant program that MTC will come out with for these like TOC dollars, basically, in this regional program. So from a county perspective, it doesn't apply to us at Contra Costa. That was one of the negotiation points that I think Commissioner Nowak was successful in because the original proposal that TOC was going to apply to the county share, and that was the uproar that was happening. And so we moved the TOC element of this from the county share into the regional share. Yeah.
I don't want to be selfish for just a minute. When we're talking the Measure J Program 13 funds, and this is all going to kind of come together, but are those strictly for new project, or is there a portion of funding available for rehabilitation, restoration of existing infrastructure, those types of things? And the reason I bring that up is the Schroeder Bridge, and its position has exceeded the funding allocation we were able to get. But it's part of this infrastructure that shows how successful we have been in driving the use of our pedestrian bike trail programs. I mean, the reason the Schroeder Bridge is facing the challenges it is, it's far exceeded its use in what it was designed for. And so that's why we're facing this position of infrastructure starting to fall apart because we're using it so much more than it was intentionally engineered for. And so are there going to be jurisdictions, whether it's county or other jurisdictions, being able to go after funding for rehabilitation, restoration, or that type of thing? They're looking at the rules now. I didn't mean to throw something at you. Yeah, I'm sorry, 30 seconds, is it a whammy or no whammy?
Yeah, please talk amongst yourselves. So Colin found it very quickly. So out of the 1.5% that goes to PBTF, that 0.5% actually goes to East Bay Parks.
Right.
And they get to allocate that. However, and they are allowed to use it for maintenance and rehabilitation. The 1% that applies to everyone else is for new projects.
All right, I'll go find another pot. Thank you. Any other questions for Matt? Any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Okay, this is an informational item only, so no action is necessary. With that, I'm going to circle back to item number 3. It is time for us to select a new chair for this committee, and I'm happy to pass the gavel, as long as it's not to Aaron. No. But again, it's been a pleasure leading this group for the last year. Further. So as the chair, I would be happy to nominate a slate of our current vice chair, Carlin Obringer, to be chair for the next year, and Commissioner Meadows to serve as vice chair.
I will second that if that's a motion.
That's a motion. I'll
All
throw
right,
it out there.
I will second the motion.
Any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
With that, let's take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Armstrong,
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier,
Aye.
Vice Chair Obringer, and Chair Carlson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Vice Chair Obringer absent.
All right. With that, I'm going to pass the gavel to you, and don't you use it. No. He has a habit. No, I'll finish you out. We'll be good. We'll pass the gavel at the next meeting. So, moving on, do we have any correspondence or communications?
No, we do not.
I have no comments other than thank you to the team and thank you to you all for making this an easy year. Any commissioner comments? Wow. All right. Staff, it's your moment.
No comments to share other than really appreciate your leadership the past year, Commissioner Carlson. Thank you for all the great leadership and running a clean meeting, so thank you very much.
Pleasure. Any other business? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned to our next regular meeting, which is tentatively scheduled